Hello and welcome everyone to another professional development learning opportunity. I am Jess Boudry. I am your presenter today, and today we are talking about assessment practices. So, looking at our agenda for today, we're going to do our predictable inclusive welcome. We are going to connect all of what we've done so far to what we're learning about today. We're also going to look back at the standards-based learning cycle that you've seen already. We're going to look at it through the lens of assessment. We're going to specifically look at summatives versus formatives. We're going to talk about what those assessment practices are, and then we'll have our intentional close. So when we look at our learning intention for today, it's nice and big. My little box up there. Our learning intention for the day is I am analyzing the purpose of assessments and the effectiveness of assessment practices on student learning outcomes. So the ultimate goal, as always, is to look at what we're doing, kind of analyze where can we change, where can we get better, what's the purpose and the why of what we're doing, and then how does that kind of translate or correlate with our student learning outcomes. So let's get started. All right, our inclusive welcome. Oh, timer started already. It's time bound. Here we go. You have at your tables, if you're joining me in person, paper and pens or pencils. If you're at home and have a sticky note or whatever you want to draw with, or if you're taking notes, I don't even care if you do it digital. It's up to you. But you are going to have 1 minute and 1 minute only to draw one of the following to the best of your ability. And this is going to be turned into me, and I'm going to assess it. Okay, so you have to draw one of these in 1 minute. The hand symbol for peace, the hand symbol for rock on, or the hand symbol for hang loose. Hopefully, if you're doing this virtually, you have that all ready to go. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to grab it while you're at your tables. And I'm going to start the timer. You have 1 minute. Go. And I cannot give you any further instruction. All right, time's up. Pencils down, hands up. You can kind of share with your table mates or at home if you want to take a look and assess. Maybe you want to share your beautiful masterpiece with somebody later. How many of you chose a peace sign and drew it something like this? Let me move this out of the way for you at home. Okay, how many of you drew something like this? That's mine, by the way. I hand drew that. Just kidding. How many of you drew the rock on symbol? Or maybe you drew it like this. That could even be I love you in sign language. Maybe you drew the hang loose sign like this. Or like that. Here's my question for you. Why in the world, and I'm really hoping you're thinking this right now, why in the world is Jess having me draw hand symbols? What's the purpose? What does it have to do with assessment practices? What does it have to do with my ability as an educator? And she didn't tell me anything other than draw it. So unless yours, by the way, I told you I was going to assess it, unless yours looks like this one over here, you're going to get points taken off. Hopefully you're, again, like, what is going on? When we think about this, how and why you assess your students is super impactful, both socially and academically. So let's talk about what that looks like for us here in our school district. First off, let's connect. What have we done so far? First, we talked about our professional learning communities. We talked about our PLCs and what we meet in every single week, and we talk about our students. What do we want them to know? How are we going to teach them? What are we going to do how are we going to know if they're successful or not? How are we going to know if they're not successful? What do we do when they learn it, and what do they do if they already know it? Right? All of those 4 PLC questions we continuously revisit. We've also talked about a guaranteed and viable curriculum, right? We're making sure that we're clear, it's got clear expectation. We're using that teacher clarity to make sure our students, our staff, our parents, our stakeholders know what we're using and why we're doing it. It's all standards based. And then our grading policies goes hand in hand with that, right? We are doing standards-based learning, not standards-based grading. So the learning comes from the standards, and that's what drives it. But then your grades also should be reflective of what skills and what concepts are in those standards. And now we're looking at assessments. So when we think, I'm going to see if I can make myself a little bit smaller. Oh, no, that's small as it goes. Maybe I'll push it down here. I'm going to move myself down here. So when we think about assessments, we are thinking about trying to provide standards-based assessments, a variety of types of assessments, our formatives, our summatives, our pre-assessments, post-assessments. Those could be formatives and summatives. And we also need to talk about feedback. Now, Dr. Womelli has a lot of great research within assessments, specifically summatives and formatives. And our goal is really going to be to look at how are we currently assessing our students, what are we using it for, and how does it tie into all of these things, these three key components we've already talked about. So this is something I've shown you before. This is that standards-based learning cycle, right? Where our ultimate goal is students progress toward meeting each standard by the end of the year. We have to look at all of these key components. So when we look at our instruction that's based on the standards, this is where we start to say, like, what do students already know? Well, we're looking at a pre-assessment. Do we give them an actual formal assessment? Is it we're asking them what they know about the topic we're about to teach? Is it giving them different areas and ways to show us those skills that maybe we're looking for in a standard? Those are ways for us to assess what do our students already know and how can we improve that learning or further that learning. Then we go into our instructional practices where students learn those skills that they don't have. And this is where we push in our UDL, our Universal Design for Learning. Our tight goals, those are our standards, and loose means. How students get there is how students get there. What do you care if a student writes an essay compared to does a voice recording, as long as it includes those key components? That's something that we've embedded into our district and that we truly believe in for all students' abilities. And that's something that really ties into assessments. That next component is where we actually assess them. This is where your formative assessments come in. We'll talk about those in a little bit. Your quizzes, your checkpoints. How do we know if students are learning the skills? This is where we really need to push into that. We're checking in with students. We're conferencing with students. We're giving them feedback. We're telling them, hey, this is where you did really well. Here's your area of growth. Here's where we can work together to improve that skill. That's something that should be embedded into your everyday classrooms and also periodically throughout your units. And then that final piece is that summative assessment. Like, what do we do if they don't know? We've gotten to the end of the unit, they don't know or aren't showing skills that they're supposed to have. Or what do we do if they already knew it prior to this and this was like too easy, boring, and now we've got behavior issues? Because it all ties together. So this is that cycle that we're really going to focus on, and we're going to spend our guaranteed viable curriculum is really in that instructional practices, making sure we have those tight goals, loose means. This assessment piece comes in all three areas. Our grading policies obviously are in that grading section, but then our PLCs are focused in this whole cycle, kind of split into these 4 sections. So when we look at specifically formative assessments and summative assessments, this was a cool visual that was created from Dr. Wormelli's video that I'm going to show you on, I believe it's the next slide, as a resource for you to use. But this kind of breaks down what he's talking about in terms of a formative assessment and a summative assessment. These are kind of buzzwords in the educational world too. But a formative assessment really should occur during the learning process. So again, as students are doing the learning, here's where we're really pushing in, conferencing. Here's a little bit of the skill that you need to. Let's practice it. Maybe you're practicing it with a partner. Maybe you're practicing it with a small group. Maybe you're doing it individually. But you're constantly getting that information or the feedback, which we'll talk about in a second, throughout the learning process. Okay? And it helps you improve along the way. Summative assessment. This is that like end goal final assessment. Sometimes a lot of people look at these as our standardized tests. So like our forward exam, our ACT. It's that final evaluation of the knowledge. So when we look at this process of formative assessments and summative assessments, we look at them side by side. The glaring difference between the two is the feedback. Oftentimes, we give feedback, and I was guilty of it as a teacher. I gave feedback on the summative assessment. I would put that feedback on that rubric for them that I created for them, that we went through, we collaborated with, and then I would put like where they were missing things. Now, we did briefly talk about in our grading policies, if a student chooses to redo that, that's okay. We've agreed, or we've kind of went through that learning process of redos are acceptable, because just like anything, a driver's test, you can take it again if you fail, right? So there are opportunities for our students to redo them, but the feedback should not be on any final product. There should be no feedback other than, here are your pieces. Now, I know that's kind of a unpopular opinion, okay? Your feedback should happen within your formative assessments and through the learning process, so that that end result is all of those pieces that you've given your students up until that point. You've already assessed that, yeah, maybe they didn't have that skill moving forward. So I'm going to make sure I pull a small group. I'm going to make sure that I touch base with that student. That's what we're looking for your formative assessments. Some of your formative assessments don't need to be graded. That could be a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a thumbs to the side. That could be a fist to 5. Tell me how you're feeling. What's a 3-2-1 journal? 3 things that you learned, 2 things that stood out to you, and 1 thing you're still curious about, right? You can have these types of assessments to help you understand where your students are in the learning process and give them feedback about why they did not show that skill and show that understanding and that knowledge of that concept. We can't wait till the summative assessment to give them their first bit of feedback. That's not helpful. So yes, I think you still give feedback on the summative as like, here is your rubric, here's the grade you got. You know why you got what you got, because we've already talked about it. We've already conferenced, and I knew what I was getting from you before you even handed it in. That should be your goal. Know what you're going to get from every student before they turn it in as a final assessment. Again, maybe an unpopular opinion, but it's going to help us show students how to reach out for help in the process before it's too late. We're going to teach them how to be independent problem solvers. We're also going to allow them to identify the strategies that help them be most successful. And ultimately, we're trying to build independent learners. So, what are we going to do? You're going to start, we're going to evaluate our assessment practices. I'm going to put myself up this way. In your journals that you were all given at the beginning of the year, I asked you to bring them today. I want you to choose one of these 3. So either you're going to look at formative assessments with Dylan William. You're going to look at feedback. This is a podcast. It's called Assess That with Tom and Nat. Or you're going to look at summative assessments with Rick or Melly. Now, This summative assessments does talk formative and summatives, but I want you to really pay attention to what he says about how summatives should or could be used, which is why I added it there. So your goal, choose one of those. Pick a spot that you want to kind of reflect on where you're at currently, or one maybe that you just want to learn at a little bit or learn about a little bit more, or maybe just one that looks cool. Whatever you choose, that's up to you. But in your journal, I want you to answer these 3 questions after or during your learning. Where do you feel your current practice is? So if you choose feedback, how do you give feedback currently? What does that look like for you? What does it look like for your students? Think about maybe what it looks like for parents. That's going to be a big piece, is how are we communicating that feedback that students are getting, especially our younger learners, to our families. As students get older, they get a little bit more independent, but not every student is responsible for or solely responsible for their learning in terms of communicating it. Second question, what's an idea that you are willing to try? There's lots of good ideas in all 3 of these. If you have the time, highly recommend listening/watching all of them, because you'll get some great ideas. Pick one you want to start with. Those of you that choose the feedback one, I want you to, I'm curious when you think, if there's something that stands out to you, because there's one piece that really stuck out to me that I was like, that's what I did. And so I made a visual for it. But I don't want to share it out because I want you to pick those things that you like. And then what was your biggest takeaway or aha moment? What was that thing that sparked the light bulb or turned the light bulb on that made the, right? That moment we look for in our students. What was that moment for you when in the one that you chose? So you do not have to choose all 3. Choose one and then answer the 3 questions in your journal. Okay? However you do that, I know we had talked about your journals at the beginning of the year. However you use them is however you use them, whether it's a venting space or it's to reflect on these things. But when we have our next PD day, what I would like to do is I would like to have an opportunity just to chat with each and every one of you, and I'll send out a sign up for you to sign up with me to just chat about some of these questions, some of the learning we've been doing, and then also just like where you're at. So I do need you to do these because I just want you at least listen to one of the 3, answer the questions, and then you don't have to bring anything with you during that time, but I do just want to get a chance to chat with each one of you. So that being said, it all fits together. Right? We've got all the puzzle pieces. We're putting them all together slowly but surely. Right now we might be doing the edge pieces, which is okay, and then we'll dig into the nitty-gritty. That's fine. But we're doing it together. We're all playing a part in this, and all of the things that we do are for our purpose of providing students with an exceptional learning experience. Everything's standards-based. You're going to get sick of me saying it. But it's what makes sense. It's what we're committed to in this district, and it's what we need to do in order to set our students up for success. Instead of us being BFFs, let's be AFFs, because we're going to assess formatives, we're going to give feedback, and we're going to have summatives. So we're going to be AFFs. And we're going to have that big brain moment where we say, you know what, here's what I take from this learning. We're going to continue to be lifelong learners as educators, and we're going to bring it together. And we're going to have that aha moment with our assessments. We're going to evaluate what we're doing already, which you guys do a lot of good things. And then where can we improve, just like we ask our students to do. So celebrate the good, okay? We're going to celebrate that good, and we're going to welcome that change. So on your way out, if you're joining us virtually, again, I appreciate you being here. You can send it to me in an email, or if you are in person and you'd rather just send me an email and not a sticky note, fine by me, whatever you please. Let's celebrate what you're already doing. So add something to a sticky note that you already do, either formative, summatives, feedback, pre-assessments, rubrics, whatever it is that are assessment practices, something you already do in your classroom. Write it on a sticky note, write your name. I'm going to put you in a random generator and pick 3 lucky winners for a small prize for me. Okay? Because I want you to really, really appreciate all the work that you guys are doing, because I do. And I really am happy to see that this is something that most of us are doing, or just could add some extra pieces in, but we're going to do it all together. So I want to celebrate you, and I want us to welcome that change. Here are your resources that were used throughout this presentation. As always, check out the resources that are there, the websites. They're all good places for good learning. And if you ever are looking for extra resources around a certain topic, please don't hesitate to reach out. I appreciate you all being here virtually and in person, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, guys.